Hello Instagram and hello Facebook. I am coming to you live today on Monday to do Feeling Fab Friday, even though it's Monday, because last Friday was the annual camping trip with my daughter's preschool, and I was busy getting us ready to go on the trip. But I wanted to come on live today to talk about copper toxicity because this is super important and really plays an effect on all your health. So we're going to talk about copper toxicity, hidden copper toxicity, copper dump syndrome, and basically the process of detoxing copper. So copper is an important element that we need in the body, but just like anything else, when we have too much of it, it can cause issues. So the highest level of copper are found in the liver, and once the liver is kind of overflowing, it goes to the brain. So an optimum level of copper on the hair mineral analysis test is 2.5. Now, sometimes we do not see copper toxicity on the minerals test clearly, which is why some people will say it's not great to see for copper toxicity, but it's actually really important to work with someone who is able to look at the test and examine whether or not you have certain signs of copper toxicity, which there are about 12 of them. And so you always need to be assessing what you see on the test with the other minerals and the levels that you see happening and the history of exposure. So copper has certain antagonistic relationships with other minerals, such as molybdenum, zinc, iron, potassium. Some of those things can be pushed out of the body, magnesium, through having too much copper. And also you have some synergists that are affecting with copper, just like estrogen. So estrogen and copper kind of go up in the body. So when you're exposed to xenoestrogens or estrogens through birth control pills, it also raises your copper levels. Some other synergists to copper would be vitamin D, B1, B12, C, and folic acid. So these are all things that we need to understand the relationship between all the minerals and that everything affects everything else. This is another reason why you should not just be taking vitamins or minerals without really testing and seeing what's going on in your body. So there's certain conditions associated with copper imbalance. Deficiencies, those would be iron deficiency anemia, arthritis, lots of chronic fungal infections. This is also seen with copper toxicity as well. Hodgkin's disease, Parkinson's disease, celiac disease, gout, hyperactivity, emotional disturbance, insomnia. Those things can also be seen with copper toxicity. So copper toxicity can produce symptoms of both deficiency and excess. Because the copper is usually biounavailable, even though you have large amounts of it. It's not being utilized by the body, okay? So this is important to understand. And then excess copper can affect conditions such as sickle cell anemia, chronic Epstein-Barr virus, depressive disorders, fibroids, endometriosis, fatigue, PMS, insomnia, hair loss, infertility, and a lot of frontal headaches. So those are some things that can happen. So what is copper toxicity? This is when a buildup of biounavailable copper in the body happens in excessive levels that causes physical and mental dysfunction. So like I said, this copper is unbound and unusable by the body, so therefore it can create simultaneous toxicity and deficiency kind of situation. So it's not okay to just go off your symptoms and say, oh, I sound like I'm copper deficient, I'm going to take copper. Or, oh, I'm definitely copper toxic. You need to really test to see what's going on, and then we can kind of evaluate what's happening based on what we see and the history of exposure. So copper toxicity is the primary cause of copper deficiency. They go hand in hand. So the copper begins to accumulate in the body's tissue, specifically the liver and then the brain. And when it's in the brain, it can start to cause some severe mental health issues. So we can see this happening in children as well as adults. So we'll get there in 1 minute. But what are some of the things that cause this copper toxicity? Why do we have such an issue? Well, for one, you can be born with it. It can be passed from mother to baby in utero. So if you had a mother who was copper toxic herself, she was on birth control pills for many years, chances are that she passed this on to you through the placenta and you were born copper toxic. My daughter has copper toxicity. I was on birth control pills for 15 years. I didn't know all this back then. So that can happen from birth. Exposure, like I said, to xenoestrogens, the plastics, the chemicals in the air, the chemicals in the meat, all that stuff can cause, because remember, estrogen and copper go up in the body simultaneously. Hormonal birth control, a huge factor for copper toxicity. Pretty much every client that I've ever had that has been on birth control has issues in history of copper toxicity. Estrogen hormonal replacement therapy also can cause that copper toxicity. Copper IUDs, this is another area that's going to cause that copper toxicity to happen, both in the blood and have higher levels of that, and in the body. Drinking water from copper pipes. A lot of older homes have those copper pipes. Copper cookware. I know it's really trendy right now to drink out of copper cups and copper shakers and copper this. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Bile issues. So when you're not able to have good bile and carry metals and those things out of the body, the bile kind of builds up and gets sludgy, and then it can also contribute to that copper just building up in the body, not being able to be carried out. There is copper sulfate, which is an approved organic fertilizer that's put on plants, and that can also cause copper toxicity. Chronic stress, slow oxidation rate. My clients who have that really high calcium magnesium shell due to stress and have that slower oxidation rate, they can just build up copper in the body just from being a slow oxidizer. I know I'm not going to be popular for saying this, but vegetarian and vegan diets are a huge contributor to copper toxicity, which leads to things like infertility, really terrible periods, PMS, fibroids, all those things, because a lot of the foods that you eat in the vegan vegetarian world are high in copper, okay? Things like cacao, things like avocado, things like nuts and seeds, all those things are very, very, very high copper. So the more that you have them without balancing it in the body and eating other things that have high levels of zinc, such as animal meat, you're going to have issues with copper toxicity. So that vegetarian vegan diet can contribute severely. Multivitamins. Most multivitamins out there have copper in them. So you just start taking, these multivitamin shakes and things, and they can contribute to copper toxicity. Things like regular swimming pool use, being in that kind of water, can also expose you to copper, and also having your gallbladder surgery and gallbladder removed, which affects the ability to remove bile, that can also cause that copper toxicity. So like I said, copper IUDs are often promoted as safe as a non-hormonal birth control option, but this copper IUD will cause increased copper in the blood and hair. I have a bunch of studies I can send you. If you want them, let me know. And if you have initially really great optimal zinc status, then the copper IUD won't cause issues initially. And if your adrenal and liver health are good and you've got good bile and all that. But if you have a weakness in any one of those areas, you can begin to feel crazy right away when you have that copper IUD in. And I know many women who've experienced that. Now, just because you have a copper IUD in and you're not experiencing anything yet doesn't mean it can't happen down the road, because it takes several months and times for the symptoms of copper accumulating to occur in the body. So I already mentioned about the pill. Again, that estrogen enhances the copper retention, and the synthetic progestin that's used in birth control pill does not have a true progesterone effect, so the estrogen takes over, and that copper issue can really take over. So when they say there's increased risk of blood clots with the birth control pill, it's due to the fact that copper raises tissue calcium and lowers magnesium, and we can really have issues with blood clotting due to that. So again, that elevated tissue copper depletes zinc, B6, magnesium, vitamin C. It also depletes the gut microflora, and it contributes to that yeast and candida overgrowth. So this is how the pill contributes to all these health issues. I've already talked about my feelings on the birth control pill, and I won't work with someone if they're on the birth control pill unless they're willing to get off, because there's no point in me trying to help you balance your minerals or your gut and your body if you continue to put that poison in you, because it's not going to get better. Okay, but once we get off, we can reverse things. So we want to talk about environmental, chemical, and copper toxicity. Like I said, a lot of those copper toxicity can be like BPA, and leach that estrogen mimicking compounds into foods and beverages, the xenoestrogens, xenobiotics. all that kind of stuff, it can really affect things. And this is where men can also have copper toxicity issues, even though they're not on hormonal birth control, and they can be accumulating it from these type of things. And if they are a slow oxidizer, if they have these issues without getting copper out of the body, then it can build up in them just as anybody else. So ceruloplasmin is the primary copper transport protein. It handles 95% of copper transport. And this is produced in the liver, and the adrenals aid in its production. So copper only leaves the body via the bile. So if we don't have good function in the liver, in the adrenals, and in the bile, we can't move copper. So we have to focus on implementing those strategies first. So, some questions that I ask some of my clients when I'm determining whether or not they have copper toxicity based on their test results is if they have taken hormonal birth control, if they have used a copper IUD, if their mother took birth control or used a copper IUD, if so, for how long and how many years, and if you've ever been a vegan or vegetarian, for how long and for how many years. So the progression of copper buildup really is due to that ongoing exposure to that copper or that synthetic estrogen. And initially, the body really begins to compensate with that healthy adrenal bile function and the zinc stores. But copper is an exotoxin that can stimulate the adrenal glands. And eventually the adrenal glands weaken due to too much stimulation, and the tissue calcium rises, magnesium declines, zinc declines, and we can see that in the hair mineral test. Sometimes the zinc is really elevated. It's not because you have too much zinc, it's because your body's dumping it and you're losing it. And that potassium drops and the sodium rises, which intensifies that stress response. And the ceruloplasmin begins to decline due to that weakened adrenal function. And then the copper transport begins to decline, and it starts to build up in the liver. And like I said, once we keep going with that, it can start to be built up in the brain. So this can, once the liver is saturated with copper, the buildup continues in the brain, and that's when you can begin to see some real mental health issues. This can lead to copper stimulating adrenaline and causing a lot of anxiety and panic. It also pushes dopamine into adrenaline, causing dopamine to decline and adrenaline to increase. And your histamine breakdown is inhibited, which leads to rashes, hives, and a lot of those common symptoms, and oxidizes serotonin and prevents it from working, which can lead to depression. So this is a huge factor in our health, in our children's health, in our health, and it's not really being addressed on a large scale level, and I'd like to change that, along with a lot of other awesome practitioners who focus on hair mineral analysis and metals and copper toxicity. So long-term stress or trauma can also cause the decline of that adrenal gland function, which is going to lead to that similar sequence of events I just told you, depleting the ceruloplasmin and depleting the body's ability to export that copper through the bile. So that slow oxidation rate also is going to allow that copper to build up, and it depletes potassium and it raises sodium. And once the adrenals get overstimulated and that begins to decline, the sodium will begin to get depleted as well. And copper increases the burn rate of magnesium by 5 times. So oftentimes when I see clients who have that copper toxicity, their magnesium levels will be really high in their HTMA. And it's not because they have tons of magnesium. Again, it's because it's a loss. And copper can also push that calcium into the soft tissue and cause that calcium shell and that calcium calcification of the soft tissue. So let's talk about some symptoms of copper toxicity. Okay, we're going to have fatigue, exhaustion, adrenal depletion, hypothyroid, nausea, racing mind, feeling wired but tired, panic attacks, depression, again, hair loss or whitening of the hair because of calcium being released into the soft tissue, which happened to me. Brain fog, spaciness, concentration, memory problems, high anxiety, irritability, emotional numbing, apathy, ruminating negative thoughts over and over that you can't stop, personality change, loss of sex drive, OCD kind of relationship. I've seen this before with someone just really obsessed with washing their hands and organizing things, and just really OCD. That can be, and it can happen after periods of stress when that sodium potassium is dumped and the copper is more exacerbated. Withdrawal, isolation, chocolate cravings, anemia, allergies, mold sensitivity, lowered immunity, insomnia, increased PMS, constipation, mood swings, despair, hopelessness, candida and yeast infections constantly, joints, aches and pains, infertility, headaches, reduced metabolism, confusion, paranoia, decreased self-awareness, ADD, ADHD, pseudo-bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. Okay, so these are all some symptoms that you can deal with. And the most common symptom of copper toxicity is going to be chronic debilitating fatigue due to that lack of bioavailable copper, and the slow thyroid function due to that magnesium loss. So again, we really need to address this at a really deep level and understand how copper affects things, especially the menstrual cycle. So for some of you women who are looking for solutions to your menstrual cycle, you need to understand a few things. Copper doubles itself in the week before menstruation. Okay, so you're gonna kind of feel that happening in your body that PMS week before. And it raises the sodium levels, which is gonna make you more irritable, more angry, have more emotion, more water retention, more stress, and it's gonna deplete that zinc, which is your immune system, also affects your skin a ton, leading to that sickness and fatigue, and depletes magnesium, leading to more anxiety, insomnia, pain, cramps, achiness, raises the adrenaline to have more anxiety, and lowers the dopamine and oxidizes serotonin, so it means you have more sadness and depression. So these are all real chemical reactions happening in your body due to copper and your minerals. So there are definitely some strategies we can try to implement during PMS, and drinking some diuretics to help flush out the excess sodium during that time, giving yourself some extra liver and bile support, and even trying some homeopathics such as Magfloss under the tongue as needed for those menstrual cramps. But the other thing we need to think about is the skin condition. So a lot of people come to me with acne issues, and we need to understand that copper and zinc are related in the body, and that copper is going to deplete the zinc. You're going to see really high levels of loss on the test. And this is really important for skin health. So copper toxicity is the common cause of that chronic acne. And again, copper's effect on the histamine levels can cause those chronic hives, rashes, flushing, any sort of skin issues that you see. The other thing we need to talk about is copper's toxicity and iron deficiency. So copper toxicity is one of the most common causes of iron deficiency, and that biologically available copper is required for the conversion of iron to the ferric form and then back again to produce that hemoglobin. So bioavailable copper is required to incorporate iron into the hemoglobin molecule. So all these things are needed. And when you have that copper toxicity, you're not going to be able to do that properly. And this is where taking iron supplements in this case is not going to be helpful and could actually lead to iron overload. We also see lead and mercury are common causes of iron deficiency in the HTMA. So the most common scenario of copper toxicity is going to be hidden copper toxicity. And this is because when the adrenal function and the metabolism are slow, copper doesn't move. And so copper can appear normal at this point on a blood work test, on an HTMA, and this is really common for my slow oxidizers. So it's really rare you're going to see high levels of copper on an HTMA and a slow oxidizer unless there's current ongoing exposure, like someone who has just gotten their copper IUD removed, someone who is having that copper in their system through birth control. Then I can see it on the test right away. But there are certain assessments, like I said, there's like 12 signs that I look for in the HTMA to determine whether or not you have that hidden copper toxicity. Now, if we do see that copper toxicity, we can also see it overtly sometimes on a fast oxidizer where it's going to be really obvious, or sometimes in children we can see it really obviously because children tend to be those fast oxidizers. So it's really important that we address this copper toxicity properly, and the most important thing is for me to do the test to see what's happening with your calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium. These are the 4 macro minerals we need to balance first, and we always need to address the oxidation rate, whether you're slow or fast, with the recommended protocols that I suggest. And we're going to assess if you've had any copper exposure, and we really want to support the adrenal function by supporting your sodium and potassium, and helping you kind of balance it that way, and supporting your bile, supporting your liver, your gallbladder, your digestion, and really get that bile flowing before we try to attempt any sort of copper detox. If we try to dump the copper ahead of time, you're going to feel like a bag of poop. Okay, so we can only start implementing copper detox once the body begins eliminating on its own. And how do we see that? Through a retest of the hair minerals. So just be prepared if you come to me and start doing hair minerals analysis. We're going to have to retest. we're going to have to keep an eye on things to make sure things are shifting in the right direction. So if the adrenals, the liver, and the bile function is suboptimal, then forcing copper out of the body is only going to lead to a temporary increase of copper in the blood, and then it will be redeposited in the body, which causes copper dump syndrome, which really causes you to really feel like crap. You can have a lot of unpleasant symptoms when this happens, and if this can happen with some people if they have really extreme levels of copper, and we just start doing the basic protocol. And what we need to do is dial back then and just implement it a little bit slowly, but this is why it's important to be in contact with someone you're working with and communicating so that you can be assisted through this time. So what causes some of that copper dumping? Zinc, taking too much zinc. I don't have anybody who has signs of hidden copper toxicity take zinc, because it stirs it up and lowers that sodium, which is going to keep our adrenals from moving in the right direction. So later we can assist with zinc, but not in the beginning. High doses of vitamin C, like 5,000 milligrams or plus, can cause a copper dump. Adrenal glandulars or adaptogens sometimes can cause that copper dump. So again, really important to be working with someone who's looking at your minerals first. Intense cardio exercise or exercise in general increases the metabolic rate, which can have you feel great for a minute and then feel like crap after you're done. Excessive stress, and then again, if we switch into that fast oxidation rate. So if you're working with me and you're a slow oxidizer and we're doing things to shift that, you can shift into fast, and we need to retest and see what's happening so that we can assist the body. So there's all sorts of things we can do to bind the copper and get it out once we're ready to start dumping it, and really, again, supporting the bile, supporting the adrenals, supporting the liver to make sure this happens. And the primary objective is to balance those macro minerals first and improve those minerals as a priority, improve the energetic potential of the body, improve that gallbladder, liver function, adrenal function, and then we can start to do a copper detox. Now, copper detox takes a long time. Sometimes it takes a year or so of the body dumping copper, and there's going to be times when you feel better and times when you feel worse, and it's really individual. I can't give you an estimate of how long it's going to take, but it can't be forced, and it can be a roller coaster and come in waves. It requires patience and commitments, and for fast oxidizers, it could look like 6 months to a year of copper dump, and for slow oxidizers, 1 to 3 years, sometimes longer. So this is really important. You really want to make sure that you're getting the proper support for this and supporting your body and helping you through it. And also for your children, this is really important to address as well, because it can really affect their ability to show up, whether they have ADHD or some of these symptoms. Some of these things are affected by copper toxicity, and we really need to be looking at that as a whole. So high copper is huge, and it really does affect focus and attention syndromes, and the body is really good at doing this, but for children who have it too, they've got some breakdown in their system, and things aren't working as they should. And that copper is hyper excitable to our nervous systems. And one thing that you need to know, if you're someone who needs coffee to get your body going in the morning, it's likely due to the high copper content of the coffee inside your cup that kind of revs you up. So copper is found in both decaf and regular coffee. So we want to really focus on the metabolism and how to assist with that. And how it affects mental health on the whole, to make sure that you feel at home in your body. So this was a lot of information, I know that, but I just needed to get this out that copper toxicity causes a lot of issues. It's not something I can give a quick fix. I had someone message me the other day, tell us how to dump our copper. It's not going to work like that, girl. I'm sorry, but you have to do the work first. You have to do the testing. You have to do the process of balancing those 4 macro minerals first, getting the liver, the adrenal, and the bile function up, and then we can start to dump the copper. And it's going to be a process. You got to be walking with someone who knows what they're doing through the process to help your body do the best that it can to chelate those metals and get them out. And we can also see other metals being dumped during this time as well. Lead, arsenic, cadmium, all those things. Mercury can contribute to copper issues, and we're going to see those metals start to get dumping as well once the body's oxidation rate is up high enough to dump those metals. But this is not a fast fix, but it really is the root of a lot of your health issues. So I need you to hear that and hear it clearly. And If you have any questions, you can message me. I have tons of great articles on children with ADHD, on mental health issues with copper toxicity, on estrogen issues, on things about the copper IUD, etc., to send you, to give you a chance to do a little bit more of your own research. And really working with me in a focused container of 6 months minimum. Like I said, this takes a long time. It's 6 months minimal to kind of get your testing done and start walking you down that journey. And many of my clients come back and do retesting and continue to work with me along the path. It's not easy, but it's definitely moving the needle and moving you forward in your health, which is absolutely necessary to have you feel at home in your body. So let's stop dealing with these issues with Band-Aids and start looking at the root cause of why you have estrogen dominance, why you have these issues, and we have to look at copper. It's essential. So I hope this was helpful for you. I hope you got some information out of it, and I look forward to hearing your questions. And I will see you this Friday for another Feeling Fab Friday. All right, bye-bye.